What's up, Taiwan? I'm Sally Jensen with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. We begin in Taipei, where tempers have flared in the legislature as opposition lawmakers try to push through reforms. The ruling party says the proposed laws haven't been properly discussed and may even be unconstitutional. Rick Glauert is live for us at the legislature. Rick, what's the atmosphere like there?
Well, it's definitely been a pretty rowdy morning here at Taiwan's legislature. Both the ruling party, that's the Democratic Progressive Party, and Taiwan's main opposition parties are digging into their positions. At times, the legislature has looked a bit more like a protest rally than a legislature. We've seen a lot of chanting, a lot of shouting of slogans, banners, flags, but we haven't yet seen any of the violence that we saw last week. That was, of course, on Friday when there was a lot of pushing and shoving. One lawmaker was tackled to the ground, and in fact, 6 legislators ended up in hospital. But with their majority in the parliament, the main opposition parties are slowly passing these controversial reforms that they say are necessary to bring about greater accountability of the government. The opponents, of course, saying that these bills go too far, they give too much power and are too far-reaching, and that opposition parties are not following due process in the legislature and that full details are not being disclosed properly.
And what does this all mean for the country now that there's a new president handling Taiwan's challenges at home and abroad?
And, well, these disputes hit at Taiwan's deep political polarization, where neither sides trust each other to play by the rules. Opponents of these bills are saying that they could put Taiwan's very democracy in danger. The opposition, with their majority in the parliament, are saying that they're simply doing the job that they were voted in to do. It is, of course, the first full day in office for Taiwan's new president, Legislature, and the situation here in the parliament could become one of the greatest challenges of his time in office. He's going to find it incredibly difficult to pass the bills he needs to make good on his political promises, particularly when it comes to things like passing bills on defense spending. In fact, Taichung yesterday used parts of his inauguration speech to call on both sides to play nice and follow due process in this legislature.
That was Rick Glauert reporting live for us in Taipei. As disagreements continue inside the legislature, outside, thousands of protesters are gathering, saying the reforms violate procedure and threaten freedoms. Our reporter Joyce Zhang has the latest.
We're outside the legislature where protesters opposing the reforms have been gathering since 9 in the morning. Organizers say that around 3,000 people are already here and they're expecting more people as the day progresses. Over 50 civic groups are represented, aligning with the DPP's stance that the KMT and TPP are rushing legislative reforms without proper deliberation.
他们在告诉我们的人民，现在审议法案都不用实际的来讨论，只要按照人数多数就可以表决通过。封杀提案，封杀提案，威权复辟。
Organizers acknowledge that differences in opinion are normal and even healthy in a democracy, but what they can't accept is KMT and TPP lawmakers using their strength in numbers to squash hearing both sides. Now, when I spoke to people in the crowd that if there were proper deliberations, if they would be able to accept these reforms, the answer was largely no, that aside from the way these bills are being put forward, that the content would also seriously jeopardize the health of Taiwan's democracy. Joseph Wu and Joyce Zhen in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The legislature is locked in a partisan standoff over 5 controversial proposals. And while the violent clashes of a few days ago have died down, there's no obvious path forward. John Van Trieste looks at what's behind the division.
A tense calm has returned to the legislature days after this brawl that injured several lawmakers. But there's little sign the issue that sparked this violence is getting resolved. The opposition, led by the Kuomintang, has proposed 5 laws that would expand the legislature's powers. One's already passed its second of 3 readings. It would require the president to take questions from lawmakers after a regular State of the Nation address. From here, things get more controversial, though. The Kuomintang also wants to give the legislature the power of investigation and to summon people to testify. It also wants to subject cabinet officials to fines or jail time if they lie or withhold information during questioning. It wants lawmakers to have more power over approving government appointees. And it wants an open record of votes for legislative speaker. These changes are meant to give the legislature more power to oversee the executive branch. But even within the chamber itself, there's deep division along party lines. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party has just won its third consecutive term in the presidential office. It doesn't want to dilute its own power, especially as it only holds a legislative minority. Office chair barricades and protest signs scattered across the chamber floor show that the calm may just be a lull in a long battle. Klein Wong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A knife attack on the Taichung Metro has left 4 people injured. The attack happened late Tuesday morning. A suspect is in detention and police are looking for possible motives. It comes exactly 10 years after a knife attack on Taipei's Metro that killed 4 and left 24 injured. Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, is just hours into the job, but he's already having to navigate complicated relations with China. After his inauguration on Monday, he went straight to work, shoring up ties with several foreign delegations. Chris Gorin has the details.
After 4 years as Taiwan's vice president, Lai Ching-te has moved into the presidency, and he hit the ground running. When his inauguration ceremony ended, Lai and his vice president, Bi Kim-hsiao, spent the rest of the day meeting with foreign delegations from Taiwan's closest partners, including the United States and Japan. U.S. visitors included current and former diplomats, cabinet secretaries, and White House advisors. The U.S. has a one-China policy, which means it formally recognizes the Beijing government and acknowledges, but does not endorse, its claim of sovereignty over Taiwan. The U.S. also maintains strong military and unofficial diplomatic ties with the self-ruled democratic Taiwan, ties which American guests emphasized as long-standing.
The U.S. commitment to Taiwan is deep, bipartisan, and principled. It is not changing.
Regional neighbor and U.S. ally Japan has also strengthened ties with Taiwan in recent years, and Japanese guests met with Lai, including diplomats and the wife of late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who had been a vocal supporter of Taiwan. Taiwan's new president thanked the countries for their commitment to security in the region.
也期盼台湾跟日本、美国等理念相近国家能够持续携手合作，强化全球民主韧性，共同实现自由开放的印度太平洋愿景。
China has been increasingly aggressive in its claims over Taiwan and refuses to rule out the use of force to take control of the island. The foreign delegations in Taiwan emphasize peace and support for the status quo in the Taiwan Strait.
The United States and Taiwan share a deep and abiding interest in maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and we welcome your commitment to maintaining the cross-strait status quo.
But such vocal commitments to the status quo did little to assure China, which views Lai, and by extension his international supporters, as advocates for Taiwan independence.
我要强调的是，台独是死路一条，不管打着什么幌子、什么旗号，推行台独分裂都注定失败。
While the president may have changed, Taiwan's international dilemma has not, and its newly inaugurated president will have to manage Taiwan's growing international presence alongside China's growing dissatisfaction with it. James Lin and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's military is reporting 8 Chinese warships operating around the country, but there are concerns that this may just be part of Beijing's response to President Lai's inauguration. Our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Raymond Kuo, a security analyst from the RAND Corporation, to find out more.
So Raymond, I want to first start off with Lai Ching-te's inauguration speech. How would you gauge his remarks, and were there any parts in his speech that you think really upset China?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did a pretty good job. I think it's important to recall that, I guess 8 years ago now, when Tsai Ing-wen was giving her first speech, there was concern not just in Taiwan, but also in China, the United States, everywhere that, man, is she going to go off the rails and declare independence? And someone like we now look back on it, we're like, you got to be kidding me. This can't possibly be what you were actually thinking. And her speech then was not all that dissimilar, at least when it comes to cross-strait policy, as Lai's. And I think, where there was a bit of a difference was when Tsai was saying that held open the door for the 92 consensus. And, it's been 8 years. As far as I understand, the 92 consensus is completely a dead letter in Taiwan. One country, two systems, the Hong Kong example essentially killed it.
So as of Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., the military here is reporting 8 Chinese warships operating around the area. It seems like a kind of a pretty normal day, given the fact that these ships operate on a daily basis. Are you surprised by this level of activity?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by all that, right? Like the PLA has been much more muted than I expected. Maybe to some extent the CCP is just distracted with their own domestic issues, but I would kind of think that that's not the case. I mean, there's the TAO put out that statement, Wang Yi put out that statement, and it's just like everything seemed fine, right? In a weird way. It was fine on the Taiwanese side. It was fine on the Chinese side. I'm like, that's weird. I did not expect that. So I would suspect, summertime is often the time for PLA exercises. We'll probably see more aerial incursions, especially perhaps balloons, occurring, I think, in the kind of late spring, which we're kind of into the summer, so kind of weather patterns. Just as the weather clears, that'll also mean that those sorts of aerial incursions will be more likely to happen.
So going back last year and 2 years ago, when Taiwan's president met with Pelosi, and then a year later in 2023, when she met with McCarthy, both of those visits sparked pretty large-scale exercises. Does the inauguration mean that we're going to see a potential response of that scale in the next couple weeks or months going forward?
The kind of tricky game that the Chinese tend to play is that anything that they don't like, they'll call it a provocation, whether or not it actually is a provocation. And so we kind of have to, there's an element of just discounting what they say, just because they're just going to drum up it. They're going to make a pretext. I don't think they're really going to go as far as, say, a McCarthy or Pelosi kind of scale. They want to save that sort of signal for when it actually matters. I mean, there's a danger here for the Chinese of crying wolf, right? Like, or whatever the appropriate phrase is. If they're too often saying everything is a provocation, and then other countries just be like, yeah, you think everything is a provocation. We really just don't trust you when it comes to believing what you say and thinking that you actually think of this as beyond the pale or some kind of violation.
That was our reporter Jaime Ocon speaking to Raymond Kuo, a security analyst from the Rand Corporation. Taiwan's export orders for April had their biggest jump in nearly 2 years. The Economy Ministry says the country's export orders that month hit $47 billion. That's an increase of 10.8% year on year. The ministry says demand for artificial intelligence and high-speed computing were behind the growth. The ministry expects demand for AI to fuel further growth throughout the rest of the second quarter. American tech giant AMD may soon set up a research and development center in Taiwan. AMD has applied for a government R&D program designed to attract foreign tech companies to Taiwan. AMD's investment and government subsidy amounts are under review. Its application comes after its competitor, NVIDIA, announced plans to set up an R&D center in Taiwan last month. Taiwanese Olympic judoka Yang Yongwei had to settle for silver at the 2024 World Judo Championships in Abu Dhabi. Yang made it to the final of the men's 60-kilogram category before losing to Georgi Sadalashvili of Georgia. But the result is still Taiwan's best ever performance at the competition. The World Judo Championships is the final Olympic qualifier before the Paris Games in August. Yang's silver medal makes him 1,400 points, which guarantees him the top seed in his Olympic category. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Before we go, watch as people in northern Taiwan haul a net out of the ocean as part of a traditional fishing practice. I'm Sally Jensen. Take care and see you next time.